Hi, welcome to another episode of the Chief of Staff Show. I'm so glad to be joined today by Sylvia Kochi, the founder of Life Mentor Global and a fractional global chief of staff. Sylvia, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Melanie, for having me. It's a pleasure to be joining you.
So, like we always talk about on the Chief of Staff Show, we like to start with what led you into this profession. So, would you mind sharing a bit about your journey into becoming a chief of staff?
More than happy to. Throughout my career, I worked in program management as a PMO leader. And all of the time, I've noticed something that's super easy for me to connect strategy with operational. So I had the ability to easily understand both perspectives. And it just naturally came for me to be the middle bridging person. What I saw when I saw this job opportunity at LinkedIn, then it was like, this is absolutely me. This is just absolutely the perfect opportunity for me to bring my skill set into place. So that's how I landed as a chief of staff from a program management background.
I love when people have that light bulb moment of realizing the chief of staff role is for me because we always say like there's no two chief of staff jobs that are the same, whether you're working in one industry or company size or stage, or even for a different executive within the same organization. No two jobs are the same and no 2 days are the same. But there is that common thread that we all have of like we're the gap fillers and we're the bridges. So I love when people see that I'm not quite sure what a chief of staff is, but this is me. Like this is for me. It sounds like you had that moment too.
Absolutely. I wasn't creating this path on purpose. It wasn't, I'm going to be a chief of staff after I stopped being a PMO leader. It's literally when I saw this opportunity. And a lot of the skills are very much applicable. So it's not like it's a completely new area. And what, as you've mentioned, what I love about this is that we've got so many different backgrounds from business operations through to product development experience, legal communications. Mine personally is from program management, office leadership. So there is definitely that aha moment that I went through at the time of application and just seeing myself in the role.
There's so many transferable skills too. Wherever you're coming from, there's a lot that can transfer into the chief of staff. What was the biggest surprise though for you getting into a chief of staff role? Was there anything that was sort of unexpected that you ran into?
I love the question. In terms of expectations, because I went in with a very open, curious mindset, I have a special way of thinking about it. And this is a wow or how method. And this is something that's been serving me super well throughout that role and as well as I've created my own business afterwards. Wow means if I do something well, I think I'm going to achieve what I set out to achieve. And that lands well and it's in line with expectations. That's the wow, celebrating and appreciating that this worked. The how at the same time means that if I didn't get something right or not in a way that I expected, we call it failure, I call it learning. That gives us opportunity to continually just try new things and new ways of working. And because of that mindset, that I brought into the first role with LinkedIn. And throughout that, ever since, this has been more of a curiosity, openness, and learning excitement, as opposed to something that would have felt like a challenge. It was more of a, okay, this sounds amazing. I've not done it before. Let's see where it lands. And working with the principal and leadership team, this has been an amazing experience throughout.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned mindset because a lot of times people will talk about what do I need to become a chief of staff? And I'm like, it's less of a skill set and more of a mindset. You have to be curious. You have to want to roll your sleeves up and help, but also have that strategic piece of like, let's figure things out, looking at the bigger picture. So, yeah, it really is such a mindset thing. Especially, like we said, there's no 2 days that are the same. So, you have to have the mindset that you're excited about that. So, how long were you a chief of staff at LinkedIn?
Nearly 4 years.
And so tell me about now you've transitioned into offering fractional chief of staff services all around the world and you've started your own company. I'd love to know first about the fractional chief of staff piece and how that works out. And then let's definitely talk about what you're doing with Life Mentor Global, because I think that's really important, especially the thread between entrepreneurship and chiefs of staff. But let's start with the fractional chief of staff piece. How does that look like? Or what does that look like for you?
I love that. Fractional chief of staff. So imagine in a way that you need services, very simple, like a hairdresser every now and then. It's not a regular thing. It can happen with fractional chief of staff as well. When you need a trusted advisor, whether you need someone that you work with, depending on the size of the organization, you might need someone for 3 days a week. You might need someone for a period of time as an interim chief of staff, whilst you're finding someone who's going to be taking the role on full time. But there's also an opportunity to actually create this chief of staff role in a way that works almost like a company as a business. And this is what I've done. And what I've learned from LinkedIn throughout those absolutely fantastic, stellar 4 years, nearly 4 years that I've spent there, that I totally loved and brought with me. And this is also connecting with the entrepreneurial route, is that when you work with an executive as a trusted member of the leadership team, that level of trust. And with my consultancy background of 14 plus years with PricewaterhouseCoopers, that also helped me put these learnings and equipped me with a skill set that I can go into business and very quickly hit the ground running and find ways to actually solve those problems and build that trust at a pace. My perspective in why I created this path for myself upon completion of that fantastic role is because I believe that there is an opportunity to make this role available to a much wider group. So there are in-house chiefs of staff a lot of the times that I'm seeing, but at the same time, there's also opportunity to work with CEOs of various sizes of businesses, and that's certainly that I've experienced working from startups throughout my career all the way through to 10. Partnering with the companies. So that's been a really interesting experience, understanding depending on the size and the need of the business and how what we offer as chiefs of staff can actually work in various areas.
Yeah. And that's so important. I'm always telling people that just about everyone needs a chief of staff, you know? But the reality is, not everyone can afford one. Not everyone needs one full time. But if you are, a visionary, a founder, if you're a CEO, no matter what size or stage, you need that person who's your right hand. And a lot of CEOs and startup founders, nonprofit leaders, I'm seeing also, they know that they need an executive assistant, but they don't quite connect the dots yet that they need a chief of staff. And so I think the fractional path is a great sort of entryway into that, to where they can experience what it's like to work with a chief of staff, someone who's looking at the bigger picture, who has a strategic lens, but they're also your right hand person and they are helping to execute on things no matter what the basis is. Like if it's a project basis or if it's, like you said, 3 days a week, 5 hours a week, whatever it might be. It's really important. And I think that that's going to become more of a trend. We're going to see a lot more of that. So you're a bit of a trendsetter, Sylvia. So I'm sharing your insights with us. But tell me more also about Life Mentor Global, because I think this is really interesting. I have been seeing more and more how there's a thread between chiefs of staff being great entrepreneurs. And so we get so much insight working as that trusted right hand person. We see how businesses are run. We see, the hurdles, and we see all of that in the chief of staff role. And it makes it so much easier to apply it when we decide to start our own businesses. So tell me more about your path into starting your own business.
My path started at the age of 13, actually, when I became one of the winners of a young entrepreneur program called I Want to Be a Millionaire. I recently posted a picture from back then when I had my very first speech. For me, that was a summer long program that gave me insight into what it's like being an entrepreneur. And I remember I took cold beverages, drinks to a nearby lake by bicycle. That was my business model for the summer. And it's been amazing. But the very first minute I went to the first fisherman and said, "Would you like my services?" Then I was shushed immediately that I chased away the fish. I cried and I said, "I'm never going to be an entrepreneur ever again." And that experience, I didn't let it to be my final experience about entrepreneurship, but I actually learned so much more. I gained curiosity towards it. So I ended up having a diploma, which is in entrepreneurship and as an economist. So I learned purposefully into the world of what does it take for someone to build their own business. Then I also worked as a volunteer with the Young Entrepreneurs Association for nearly 5 years in Hungary. And that also gave me insight into various sizes of the businesses. So when it came to thinking about what my future looks like, what it actually entails in terms of the skill set, the PMO mindset, and my experience at LinkedIn as a chief of staff, for me, that was a natural way of bridging the strategic view through to actually making things happen and working in partnership with a really wide variety of stakeholders. So my personal path stemmed from a very, very young age, but at the same time, the skill set isn't that completely different for a chief of staff to an entrepreneur in a way that it also bridges the bigger picture. It's also, we understand the rhythm of the business, we understand what it takes for an executive to win. And in that way, it's quite big fun to actually apply it to our own business and see how we walk the talk.
Yes, definitely. So tell me more about Life Mentor Global. I know you're having experts getting together and sharing with the community, but I'd love to hear more about that.
Absolutely. So Life Mentor Global is my business that I've created with the intention to actually share chief of staff consultancy and PMO consultancy, the areas of expertise that I have, but also working with a wider group depending on the size of the business that I can bring into various projects. One of the things that I always wanted to keep as a part of this is there's a business to business focus with a chief of staff focus, as well as there's a personal one to one, just like in any business, when leaders are also working with individuals, there's a natural style of developing individuals. And I do that with a dual business to business and business to customer mindset. But at the same time, I wanted to create a community. And for that reason, one of the things that I'm really, really excited about seeing how it lands and how it works is that I've created Life Mentor Circle. And Life Mentor Circle is a program where leaders come together, learn together from entrepreneurs, founders, and just as much from corporate leaders about the personal experiences on various topics through masterminds, through coaching, through peer learning. And that's something that I'm really, really excited about because it's nice to belong to an amazing community. And it's even more beautiful to see what people get out of that experience.
Yeah, the community piece is so important because a lot of times, especially for chiefs of staff, you're sort of siloed off into your own world. But for everyone, I mean, around the world, we need more community. So I love that you're creating that and making that real. Like, I think a lot of times people sense that they need community, but they sort of wait around for like someone else to create the perfect one. And, they'll dabble or they'll visit. But I love that you've just decided, like, I'm going to do it. That's that chief of staff mindset again. Like, we need a community for this. I'm going to make it happen. So I love that you've
Thank
done.
you. Thank you. And it's not just for chief of staff. So that's how, as chief of staff, work with a variety of stakeholders from various parts of the business. It's very much encompassing a very different mindset. And it also creates an opportunity to connect, to get different perspectives in a safe way to actually learn from each other in an environment where there's trusted integrity upheld in terms of basic values that we stand for as a part of Life Mentor Circle.
Yeah. I love that so much. So you've done so much. You've had an incredible career from consulting and being a chief of staff and now being a founder. What advice would you give people? Most of our audience, they're interested in the chief of staff profession, but what advice just in general or maybe about the chief of staff role would you share?
I'd encourage everyone who's interested in the chief of staff role to speak to many different chiefs of staff. Because of the variety of the role and the skill set that we each bring to the role, they will have absolutely different paths. And what I love about Elevation Chief of Staff is that you're bringing these type of ideas and this type of experience to a wider group so that they can also at some point just see themselves of actually this is something I could be doing. So my one key piece of advice would be talk to as many people as possible and see whether that's something for you that you'd like to do.
Yeah, I think that's a really important part too, because there's a lot of growing interest in the role. And some people might think, well, I can't be a chief of staff at LinkedIn or at a Fortune 500 company. But like you've mentioned with the fractional chief of staff, maybe there's a small startup. Maybe you have a friend who is starting a business and they might need a chief of staff for a certain project. So there are entryways to get into the profession, even if you don't have the consulting background or the MBA or any of those things. You can still become a chief of staff is just like exploring that curiosity, talking to other people, and understanding that there's not one single pathway for it.
It's so important what you're saying, Melanie, and particularly because what I've found is that a lot of the times those roles are not named chief of staff immediately. And this is one of the roles that I've found that it's quasi chief of staff. A lot of the times it's called that way. A lot of the times people just recognize themselves. I'm actually doing strategic connections between executives. I'm actually doing these steps already, even though my title is not chief of staff necessarily in the business. So I found that this is a much richer community for it. And there's actually a real welcome and helping and lifting each other up, regardless of the job title. So it doesn't require necessarily to have that one particular, not just title, but in terms of qualification, it's more of a skill set that we can develop throughout the years and working with others. It's something that someone can work towards even in their current roles as they start to understand more and more about what it takes to be a chief of staff.
Yeah. And it's so interesting. We often talk about what led up to getting into the role, but I'd love to hear from you now that you're out of the role and doing the founder thing and, of course, fractional chief of staff services. I'd love to hear about what's next. What does the future look like for you? How do you envision that?
For me, this is definitely an area that I will continue bridging strategy with operations in a form that's going to be creating value. Ultimately, what drives me is to put my expertise around transformation, bringing commercial results, and artificial intelligence, which I've been working with since 2013. So definitely the area around chief of staff skill set, but I'm also firm believer that we all have a chief of staff of our lives as well, and that's us. And to also help others see how they can be their own chief of staff throughout their lives and how they can bring those skill sets into their day to day as well.
That's a really interesting concept. I mean, I've been in the chief of staff world and profession for so long, but I never considered being a chief of staff of yourself. It makes a lot of sense, but can you expand on that, how you view that?
Absolutely. Just thinking about the fact that we've got technically not a lot left of this calendar year. So, with that in mind, as a chief of staff, I would naturally think about what does this quarter require up front. I'm starting to plan ahead for the following quarter, half, and what we need to achieve that. And how can we apply the same principles to our own lives? What are the three things I want to achieve before the end of this year? And how am I putting those enablers in place, whether that's calendar blocker, whether that's reading a book, if that's what I set out to do for my own personal life, that enables me to achieve what I'd like to do that. So again, bringing the strategic mindset and applying it in various scenarios, that really excites me.
That's really great advice because the funny thing is, I don't know if you've ever experienced this or if you're familiar with it, but a lot of times the things that we can do for our executives, we struggle to do for ourselves. It's very easy to promote them and to, speak on their behalves and to make sure that they have, even if we're checking and making sure they are taking time for lunch or like whatever we're doing to make sure that their life goes smoothly, that they can achieve all of their objectives and goals. And we're always thinking about them and them reaching their goals. How much more important is it for us to think about ourselves and that we're reaching our own personal goals? So I love that you've brought that up.
Such an important topic. It's literally you can't fill from an empty cup. And it's our responsibility to make sure that we can give our best. And the best way we can give our best is if we actually pour into our cups. And it's also good whether someone wants to end up being in several chief of staff role or whether they see this as an opportunity to them to go whether in their own business or other parts of the businesses at the same time. It's all about making sure that we look after ourselves in a very similar way so that our executives can benefit from us from the longer term just as much as the leadership team and those around us in our lives.
Yeah. Well, this has been such a great conversation. I feel like I've gotten so much great advice from you. And I know that our audience is going to get so much great insights from the wow and the how that you brought up earlier to the chief of staff of yourself. Is there anything you'd like to add before we close out?
Really appreciate this opportunity and curious to see how this profession will continue developing in the upcoming years, with 70% of skills going to change by 2030 based on a recent LinkedIn report. This is a space for us to watch and continue and evolve with in the future as well.
Well, I'd love to, since you did bring that up, I'd love to touch on that a bit. I am a real believer that AI is going to accelerate chiefs of staff. It's going to make our jobs so much easier so we can focus on the more strategic, relationship driven piece. What are your thoughts? What are you seeing there in that space?
I've been working with artificial intelligence since 2013, way before it became generative AI, and before this became so democratized and openly available to a wide group of people, almost everyone in the world, and giving us the various recommendations in various sites. Um, what it has taught me at the same time, since I created my business this year, is I needed to take a very, very hard and strong look at what I can do as a chief of staff that AI cannot do. So I spent 2 months looking through with a magnifying glass of these are the things that someone can achieve with LinkedIn, sorry, with artificial intelligence. Um, these are the things that someone can achieve with artificial intelligence. These are the things that someone can achieve without. These are the things that only I can do best as an individual. And it can be empathy, it can be understanding the relevance, it can be even transformation that may not be widely known or available to a wider group of individuals, but working with executives, this is something that we would have visibility into way in advance. And what those areas are that would actually be automated and much easier. So I recently shared about this concept of apply, automate, and also augment, and how you can actually leverage these artificial intelligence specific ways to elevate your role as a chief of staff, applying LinkedIn as how you can achieve this and elevate your role as a chief of staff, and what it actually means for you to use artificial intelligence for the benefit of the business and for also making your life easier and ultimately making your CEO's life easier.
Yeah. And you're so right. There are these pieces of the role that are often overlooked because they're like the soft skills that people say, but the empathy piece and the understanding piece. And I found also in some of my chief of staff roles that we're a bit of a life coach, encouraging and motivating. And like we know when the tough times are coming and the busy seasons are coming, and we have to be that, calm, steady voice on the other side, getting the team and the executive through those seasons. So you're right. Those are things that AI is not going to be able to replace or automate. So it's a very interesting thing. The relationship building across departments, that's something that also AI can automate. So I'm excited to see how it continues evolving.
Completely. And I'm not worried that a chief of staff role would go away anytime soon.
Yeah. Well, we are agreed there. Thank you so much, Sylvia. I've really appreciated this conversation. I know that our audience is going to learn so much. Where can people find you if they want to follow along with your story, get more insights from you? What would be the best place?
Appreciate that. Thank you so much. So I'm on LinkedIn, Sylvia Kochi, but also at www.lifementorglobal.com.
Great. And we'll drop that into the caption also so people can find that. Thanks so much for your time today. We really appreciate you.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me, Melanie.